Hey guys, what is going on? RedMaster here, and welcome back to another episode of Cards and Castles, where today I'm happy to announce that we have received a new patch. Less than 24 hours ago, a new update was kind of given out to all players, at first appearing a bit cosmetic. Things like the tournament was switched over to now what you see as draft. And along with that, you can probably tell some of the fonts have changed. If you're on Android, you might have noticed this before. I know that some testing went out to Android previously, but now people on all platforms, whether you're Apple, Android, or PC, you should be able to see this new text put into place. But that's not what we're here to talk about today. Following up with that patch, or at least that update, we received the patch a few hours later, and I have to say it was quite an interesting one for some people. A bit faster than I was expecting it to drop, but still, nonetheless, it's an update and one that has brought a bit of interest with it. And what I mean by that is that a lot of things on this list are mostly considered buffs, aside from one big obvious nerf. But then again, it depends on how you look at some cards. You might consider some nerfs, some buffs. Most of it, though, you could probably agree with that, they are buff related. And of course, some standing out really more than others. So what we're going to do today, of course, is we're going to review some of this patch, or at least some of the more interesting points that I have listed down here. Of course, if you guys want to check out the full patch for yourself, a link to the Reddit post will be down in the description below, where you can read up read up on all the changes if you haven't done so already. And if you haven't done so already, be sure to leave your comments on your thoughts about this patch. Of course, a lot of people have had their own sort of say in how they consider this patch to be. But with that being said, let's go ahead and start this review of the November 2018 patch, which do I call it a buff? I don't know. Let's jump right into it. So the first topic we're going to talk about is the Drakes. Now, the Drakes have had a history recently, or at least since the Enchanted Grove release, of being one of the poorer archetypes to exist, one of the ones that really weren't so capable of making it into competitive play, based on how they work and what their stats are like. It was a poor combination for the dragons. However, we recently in this patch got a lot of stat buffs to a lot of these drakes. Cards like Green Drake, Fire Drake, Ice Drake, and Faithful Drake are some. Well, I think most of the examples actually are those 4 drakes. I forgot the math there for a moment. But yeah, most of those are considered buffs. You now have Faithful Drake sitting at what was the previous Shield Runner stats. You got Ice Drake now with some more attack and health to it already. And then Fire Drake and Green Drake getting a boost to their health. All nice, good things to see. Helps them survive the game a little bit longer. Also, what this does is, well, at least how I see it, an indirect buff to Dragon Search, seeing as how a lot of these guys now have their, or what was considered previously, stat buffed from the Dragon Search. If you wanted the Drakes at the kind of stats they are now, you're going to have to pull them from a Dragon Search. But now that these guys have those stat lines, Dragon Search is just made that much more powerful when you consider that it gives them an additional 1/1. So things like Faithful Drake become a 3/5, Ice become 4/4, Fire Drake become a 3/6, and a Green Drake becomes a 5/6. So it's quite interesting to see there. On top of that, though, however, a change was also made to the Dragon Pool, referring to the Secret Dragon and Stone Dragon statue card pools that or at least that they pull from, which is giving, the Drakes. There was a nerf to that. You can no longer pull Stone Drake from those pools, so crazy Secret Dragon buff Stone Drakes aren't going to be popping out anymore, so that should be nice, meaning the highest roll you can get from a Secret Dragon is probably going to be considered a Green Drake or a Fire Drake, depending on how you look at it. If you want the explosion over the stats, then your main goal is the Fire Drake. But still, overall, I wouldn't say that that's a bad nerf on their part. I think this is sorely needed. People were kind of pissy, or not pissy. Pissy's the wrong word. People were kind of upset about having Stone Dragon being pulled from, or Stone Drake being pulled from the Secret Dragon, leaving a huge body immediately on face to deal with. Normally things like 15, 13, or around, if not around that stat line, that was kind of the norm that you see from Secret Dragon, because things like Magic Eater were being buffed from Secret Dragon, and the combination of the Magic Eater buffs on top of the Stone Dragon stats plus an additional 2/2 created some nasty, nasty things. But what does this mean for the Dragons overall, of course? I think this is a great direction for them. They sorely needed the help, and I think this patch certainly gave it to them. If not, I mean, it's not really clear where they'll go, if they'll see additional play or not, but I do think it's nice to see them getting that stat increase, put them kind of on par, makes you reconsider Dragons as a threat or not, depending on if, people are playing Dragon Search with their Viking decks, or have tossed in, a little Fire Drake or a little Green Drake. Normally I don't think that would happen, at least the Fire Drake or the Green Drake toss in. But you guys kind of get where I'm going with. I don't know if this is going to impact them or dramatically, but I would say this is definitely nice to get them in a bit more competitive direction. Seeing them get the love that, like this, put their stats up. If they're not really on par yet, they'll probably eventually be, hopefully, maybe within the time of the next patch. We'll see. We'll see. I know there are people experimenting with Drakes currently on the ladder. To varying success, I know. So we'll have to see how they develop. I think that I have decent hope for them. I'm not super sure that they're gonna get that they're gonna skyrocket to the top. Excuse me, but overall, I think this is a definitely welcome change for the Drakes. From there, we move into Lifesteal. And the Lifesteal was an interesting buff that kind of put forth into action here. Mainly the three cards you currently see on your screen, Talabos, Vampire, and White Knight, are the subject of these Lifesteal changes. Talabos getting an increase to health, White Knight getting an increase to health, Vampire getting an increase to attack. I definitely think this is interesting to see cards like this getting buffed. I mean, we've already seen some play. I mean, White Knight was definitely a big player in a couple of decks, mostly because of how annoying she was to come out and having her, lifesteal to deal with. And at 2/5, she was, a pain in the butt. But now Talabos is going to be rocking, or at least somewhat rocking, the old White Knight stat line, except this time with a bit more attack. So you have to be careful about how you trade into Talabos. But I do think it's interesting Talabos is getting some more love. Honestly, I'm not sure if we'll see more play of him, because there are deadly combinations that can be played with the Talabos, at least in the red. And not even like with a specific deck, more like, well, it's more like you can sack your littler guys, your Lumberjacks, your Salahar Riders, by turn 3, turn 2, even if you have a coin, and all of a sudden just turn a 1/1 Lumberjack into Talabos, meanwhile still getting Lumberjack's effect, of course, or Salahar, depending on what you use. I mean, again, I don't really know how Talabos will be thrust into play. Some people might use him, some not. Same with Vampire. I really don't see his change as all too imposing. It gives him that extra attack, sure, but his life is already pretty much on par with his attack. So, I mean, I guess what this means is that no matter if you can't exactly kill a Vampire with one strike, he's guaranteed to pretty much heal back what he's lost, I guess what that means. So, I mean, obviously you can't trade things like your tokens, your rats, your zombies into Vampire, but I think a bigger guy can certainly take out Vampire with no problem. I think, honestly, Vampire still isn't where Lifesteal is when you compare him to everything else. Now, I think, in my opinion, exceeding or at least Talabos is now exceeding Vampire, in my opinion, with this. But I think the main focus of the Lifesteal bunch is White Knight that should be observed here. White Knight was already pretty prevalent in Knight decks, which on and off, were seen as slightly competitive, slightly viable. I certainly have a Knight deck that I've been pushing, and you guys know that, honestly, this White Knight change, no, I think I already do have White Knight in my deck. So, honestly, White Knight's, Lifesteal change is definitely going to be a boost to Knight decks overall. And if you're maybe not using a Knight-focused deck, I think White Knight's still a great fit in any kind of Warlock deck, especially if you're running those Armories and or Blacksmiths. They're definitely going to be helping keeping White Knight alive. Even with one Armory, White Knight becomes a 3/7, which is tricky to deal with, especially when you have Lifesteal thrown into that mix. So overall, Lifesteal, I think, getting a solid buff out of this. Definitely, again, one to watch out for, more than the Drakes in my opinion, because Lifesteal have already had a small influence on the meta game as it is. They're kind of creeping in there. If not really, if they're not in the meta game per se, then they're still floating around, or at least close to that meta game. So again, definitely a change that I would watch out for. and Arcanon didn't get a change, so I think people were already. Well, I mean, it's fair that Arcanon didn't really get a change towards him because Archie is already pain in the butt to deal with without having any sort of change thrust on him. I think overall he's just a fine card that we don't really need to touch. So with that being said, that's kind of my take on the lifesteals. Overall, an interesting change, a bit nerve-wracking, considering the changes to Talavos and White Knight. Vampire, I don't really think, he's made into a super apparent, or excuse me, it's not really clear why I should include him in a deck. So I can't really say much about Vampire, but again, like I said, White Knight, Talavos kind of make up for what Vampire lacks. So, with that being said, I think Lifesteal, gets a pretty hefty change from this patch. And with that, we move on to the next change in our list, or at least our review of anyway of this patch, and one that I think, or at least I might go fairly more in depth with than the others, is the changes to knights. Specifically 3 knights, though. It's going to be Earth Knight that I talk about. Well, let me just scroll over to it. It's going to be Earth Knight, Cleric, and Paladin. Now, I know Paladin might surprise you guys, or at least, why you're talking about him, but I'll get to him momentarily. I want to start with Earth Knight first, though. Kind of go in a bit of a well, at least cost order, if that makes sense. Increasing cost order. Anyway, Earth Knight, our first, or at least topic that we're going to discuss here for these knight change. Now, Earth Knight got a decrease to his stats, of course. Now he's a 1/1, but he makes up for it in armor 3. Now, that's kind of interesting. When this first dropped, people were kind of worried because armor is already one of the tricky things to work around. He essentially is granted the same armor as Jomviev, and with armor, it kind of just regenerates. So if you can't get rid of it, again, it's just going to come back the next turn. So I think what people are fairly nervous about with Earth Knight, and we don't know, I mean, the people might be already running this, is they're kind of just running Knight buffs, if that makes sense. Throwing in, or throwing down at least an Earth Knight turn 1, and then following up with a Flame Shield buff, making it a 3/3 with the armor 3, creating a 3/6 turn 2 with regenerative 3 health, or at least the, armor portion of it. So I do understand why people are worried about it. However, with Earth Knight, something to take note of, it does have armor, well, duh. But what that kind of means is that debuffs are going to be, or at least bleed or debuffs are going to be your kill switches for these Earth Knights. Things like mugging, disable also got to change to a -1/-1, but people consider that more of a nerf. Disable is a 1 for 2, or at least 1 cost for 2 cost trade there, so not the worst thing in the world, but again, Disable is kind of an iffy card to use. But then again, you have Mugging, you have Onslaught, you have Dagger Storm, all things people also currently run. So I don't see why Earth Knight is on well, or at least I understand why it's on people's radars. I shouldn't say that, but I think it's something that might be a worst case scenario if that you run into maybe every once in a while. I don't think Earth Knight's going to be a meta shaker per se. Sure, when he gets when he comes out in the field, you're gonna have to worry about, oh, will this thing be buffed? Will it get a Flame Shield? Will it get a Battle Ready? Will it get Shadow Katana? All that stuff. But I don't really think it's a super crazy thing to concern ourselves with, because we do have to remember Earth Knight also has that 1 ship damage. It's not going to be doing a whole lot of damage to your face. You can allow it to sit potentially for a turn or 2 if you need to before you can get rid of it. It's not going to be the end of the world. If it's buffed in any way, then of course you're going to have to put some more priority towards it. But it's something that really shouldn't be too crazy. Although that being said, I think Earth Knight did definitely benefit from this buff. He is now a stronger contender in the early game slots, being able to counter pretty much nearly everything that that's thrown at it. Guards trade perfectly with it, at baseline stats. Cards like Lumber, Salahar. Well, Salahar, if you get the last will off on Earth Knight, then that's a kill. But, Salahar, Lumber, Peasant, Manfish, they're not going to be able to get rid of Earth Knight. And, if they can't kill it in that same turn, his armor's going to come back fresh as new. So, it's really like you're not going to be doing any damage to it unless you kind of just wipe it from the board. Hence why it's got the 1/1. But overall, again, Earth Knight, very powerful change, I think, in my opinion. Definitely one that's going to redefine what Earth Knight's role kind of is. But, he's not the only one that's gotten a change, of course. Of course, we're going to move on to Cleric now, because I feel like this one's sort of a minor-ish change, in my opinion, but one I think still deserves to be brought up to people's attentions, knowing Cleric's history and whatnot. It recently got an attack increase, as you can see, now a 2-4, and also heals a random damaged ally for 3 rather than 4. I think this was definitely interesting to kind of balance out Cleric. It's not at a place yet where you can deal safe damage to Cleric, because of course Cleric, if you hit it, it has a chance to reheal itself perfectly, given that, the 3 is pretty much what you want to land on the Cleric to, again, heal itself perfectly. But I do think it's a nice kind of alteration to Cleric and what Cleric is. It's not gonna be just a chipper that deals damage just to heal maybe itself or the castle. In a way, it kind of just creates itself now as a more defined unit, more of an actual unit rather than just a heal chipper. Um, I mean, this is the one that I think I was going to talk about least of all, considering the other two changes. Um, but people were concerned for obvious reasons. Giving Cleric more attack, is definitely dangerous because it can do more damage, and of course still end up getting the healing that it needs, or at least what it's intended for. So one that I think, again, fair, or I guess fair play to the people who are concerned about it. And that's probably the right term there. Um, but again, Cleric will always kind of just yikes. Cleric will kind of always just be there, or at least thrown in decks, at least in my opinion, for more of the heal damage rather than, like, or at least the healing factor more than the damage. So, but overall, a good change to Cleric, again, making him more defined as a unit. Now, the last one I wanted to talk about is one that probably confuses a lot of you, considering that the other big change was probably more Guardian. We already talked about White Knight, of course, in the previous Lifesteal buff, so we're not going to really talk about him here. But I feel like Paladin is more of a talking point than the Guardian is right now. I know Guardian now is kind of just turned to a 3-3 with armor 2, 3-1 again with the armor 2. But Paladin obviously is one that kind of piques my interest just a slightly bit more because of the jump that it took from 4 HP, 4 HP to 6 HP, again, including the resolve. It's basically been put on the same level as Frog Prince that you see next to you there, except Paladin rocking the -1 attack power. And obviously that could be changed easily with cards like Stables and Armory, but I think this makes Paladin more likely a viable target for players to, if they of course don't have the collection. Of course, I'm not saying that everyone should be running Paladin, and that's not really the case I'm trying to make here. Just seeing that Paladin is getting some extra love here by being increased 6 HP, making his resolve mean that much more is impressive. At 4-4, he was kind of simple to deal with. Sure, if he got the little buff from Stables, oh, okay, now it's a 5-5, but I can still easily wipe it out. 4-6, I think definitely makes him a bit more of a contender to deal with. And again, not something that everyone should probably jump onto, of course, but if you don't have the collection, I would say if you're trying to maybe build a Knight deck, Paladin might be a good choice for you, especially considering his now increased attack power, again, making the resolve that much more. So, I think I just wanted to kind of mention that to you guys. I personally don't run Paladin, but I could see maybe others who do, or maybe will, if they want to kind of mess around with it. Because Resolve is a pretty annoying ability to kind of work around. And we see cards like Joan Viev have it, and Joan Viev's already a pain in the ass. So, I mean, if you think about it, Paladin's pretty much getting Joan Viev's stat line. The only thing you're missing now is armor, which, if you play around with Stables in your Knight deck, then you can give Paladin some extra armor and set him on his way. So, again, interesting change to Paladin, but I want to hear your thoughts about this one. Again, leave your comments down below. I'm especially curious about, Paladin, or at least what you think about him changing. I did want to bring it up, but I don't think it was going to be that impactful to, when discussing it. But again, I want to hear your guys' thoughts on that. So, with that being said, that covers the Knight portion. Overall, a very interesting, pretty healthy change to kind of put them more in, or at least it kind of gets them out of the floating contendership and kind of is like, all right, now we can pretty much go toe to toe with some of the meta decks that are out there with the change that they got. And of course, I didn't mention all the night changes. There are, like I said, a few others, Guardian being one of them that got changed. So you can, again, be sure to take a look at the patch if you haven't done so already to figure out how exactly the knights were changed, other than the mention, or excuse me, other than the cards that I mentioned on this review segment. Alright, so now that we've kind of spoken about the knights, that kind of ends off our discussions regarding kind of what I consider groups of cards, or at least groups of patches, or buffs, I guess. Groups of patches. I wish I had a group of patches. No, groups of buffs. I do want to focus on some more individual cards, though, just because, you know, I feel like some are worth noting out more than others. And with that being said, we move our discussion to the Windfall Griffin. Now, the Windfall Griffin is a card that, in my opinion, has really been overshadowed by the Minotaur, being that it is pretty much the same cost, but with Minotaur you got that extra attack, which meant so much more. Now Griffin actually has more of a defining purpose, as you can see. He recently got increased to a 5/8, which I find quite interesting because now it kind of throws in the question, do you run Minotaur or do you run Griffin? Do you want the health or do you want the attack? Quite an interesting take on it, if you will. Personally, I might start experimenting a bit more with Griffin, see how he fares, because just one little armory or a little buff brings him to that 6/9 stat potentially. Again, depending on what buff you use, I'm going off the armory. So if I did throw in armory down and then follow it up with the Griffin, it would be a nice 6/9, which is 2 more health than Minotaur if you think about it. Of course, meaning you have to have the armory out in the field, but most players nowadays are running armory, so I don't see why you could maybe experiment with the Griffin. I get that you won't have armory every game, so if you want to play it more safer, you'll go for the Minotaur, and that's fine. I'm not discouraging any play towards Minotaur, but I did find it interesting to see that Griffin has more of a defined competitive role against Minotaur. Will you take the health or will you take the attack? Obviously, most people are going to still go with the attack, most likely, so you'll still see maybe a lot of Minotaur, but the Griffin, being as it is now, I think prompts some second thoughts over it, and what, you know, it's not now a totally useless card because you're also getting flying out of it, which, you know, can bypass a couple of, you know, lazy body blocks. So you never know. I don't know if Griffin will ever kind of surpass Minotaur in that regard, but still figured you guys might want to hear my take on the, or at least I figured you would want to hear my take on how I kind of perceived the Griffin change. But with that being said, I think it's a great change for him. Next up is Parrot Rush, of course, our most recent addition to the game. Got a little love this past patch. Now becoming a 2/3. Quite interesting. Honestly, I don't think that this is going to impact Parrot all that much. I do appreciate it getting that extra stat line, though, making them slightly scarier, not just being duplicates, you know, like a mass summoning of zombie statted units now. You know, the Parrot Rush might actually mean something if there's, you know, buffs currently present, like Armor or Blacksmith. And the health means that it can trade with, you know, much more token-based units if there are any out on the board. And of course, if it is buffed, it won't be wiped by a Dragon's Fire, so that's something to kind of consider with Parrot Rush now. Overall, like I said, I don't think it's going to impact the Parrot's, you know, playstyle any further. I think where it's at now is that, you know, somewhat of a support card if you're running a lot of treasure is okay. Honestly, you know, or at least a swarm for your treasure. That's kind of how I see it. You know, again, more difficult Rat King is how I like to preach the Parrot Rush. But I do think it's great to see Parrot getting a little love, and I figured I'd mention him because he is our latest card, of course, and it is great to see him getting some, like I said, love. So, overall, Parrot Rush, decent change. Again, not one that I think is going to be impactful, but good nonetheless. And with that, we move into our final card for this review video that I want to talk to you guys about. Now, this is, or at least this change anyway, is considered probably by the developer one of the only nerfs to come out of this patch list, which certainly says something. So the Mystic Dojo recently got changed from reducing the trap cost from, or at least the trap discount from 2 to 1. Now this, I think, is a great change. One that may not initially seem worth it. You know, you figure why not throw the unique on it? Why not, you know, kind of bring it out of the traps? Whatever kind of crazy change you were thinking. And I do agree. I thought this, you know, the Dojo get a bigger change. Maybe the unique would have been thrown on. I think that would have been the best way to handle it. But this change overall, I still think suits the deck and what the objective of the nerf was trying to do. So with the trap discount being reduced from 2 to 1, it's going to be harder to at least play traps with only 1 or 2 dojos on the board and being able to kind of cycle effectively. Now, don't get me wrong, if you got 3 dojos on the board, you'll still be, having that intense cycle, free cards and getting, free cards, no, well, I guess free cards. I'm trying to figure out how to word this. It's 3 cards for a free trap, and that kind of can, or at least can continue to happen until you reach a max hand, which, is, again, still a possibility out there, but I think now it will certainly be lessened, thanks to the fact that you're not going to be seeing 3 dojo every game. You might see 1, you might, even see 2 here and there, but I think Mystic Dojo getting this kind of change, again, pulls it back. It kind of gives the deck a bit more of a, or at least it controls the deck a bit more is what I'm trying to say. Having to play 2 gold to draw a card, and then hopefully that card isn't, a card you can't really throw down right now, is going to be big for impacting the trap deck. Usually they specialize, of course, in throwing a card on, or at least a trap down, picking up more, getting another trap, throwing that down, getting more card, and it continues to snowball. But with it being harder to play those initial traps to start the snowball, I think it's a great way to tone down how much cycle power that the deck has and how much draw the players are getting into their hands. So it's a great change. I think this is definitely going to impact the trap decks. You might see hopefully less of them now. Hopefully more other, or at least other decks will sporadically come up because of this. So, there's not much else to say regarding the Mystic Dojo. I think it's been a long time coming, and I'm glad the trap decks have finally received some kind of attention. Just even if it's in this small count, with the Mystic Dojo, and of course the Secret Dragon Drake pool that I mentioned earlier, definitely a good sign for, it's a poor sign if you use traps as your main, but it's a great sign for people who haven't really been taking a liking to some of the, sporadic trap decks that have been popping up here and there. With that being said, guys, I'm going to do it from me on the November 2018 patch. I know I didn't mention, like at the beginning of this video, there's a lot of changes that, went down in this patch. A lot for me to discuss in one video. I would have to make probably 3 parts if I wanted to make some cohesive content on it. But I think narrowing it down to, the changes that I mentioned in this video are pretty much what you should probably be taking away from this patch. Of course, not to diminish the other changes at all. Those have their own sort of benefits in their own rights. But if you want to know, or at least want to get an insight on what might be impacting the game more overall, I think these are the changes that are going to be doing that. But again, if you have a different opinion, do so or at least do tell me in the comment section below. Let me know what you guys think of the November 2018 patch. Do you like it? Do you hate it? Why? Do you think I, should have explained something further? Do you think I missed something? Do you think I should, make another part? Again, be sure to leave them in the comment section below. And while you're down there, if you haven't already done so, be sure to hit the like button, share with your friends. And of course, if you are new, if you haven't done so already, be sure to hit that subscribe button to help show your support of the channel. Link to the original Reddit post where you can find the patch notes if you haven't read them already, again, down in that description below. And with that being said, guys, I will be making up another tier list video, just sort of a forward announcement now. Usually, I like to make I like to let the meta, or at least the ranked play settle down a bit before I make a tier list video to really evaluate if there are any changes in what I think the card or a card's power is. So expect a tier list video soon. And yeah, I think that's going to be it for me. So until next time, guys, stay gaming. I think I hit my mic. Oh dear.